Evidently, Hollow Knight Silksong is one of those games annually gamers pretty much unanimously agree is a masterpiece. I haven't played it yet, and honestly, I don't know if I'm ever going to. There's way too many games I want to play. I did watch a few streamers spend their time with Silksong, and judging from what I've seen so far, it looks solid. I did play Hollow Knight, but barely. I dropped it after a few hours, but I was definitely aware of its, how would you say, charm. It's one of those games where you see the vision, but it just doesn't click for you the way it did for the majority of the audience. You can tell the plaudits are deserved, but you're just kind of left with a medium italicized question mark over your head. I hate when that happens. I definitely have to return to it one day and really sink my teeth into it. I didn't give it a fair enough shot. When will that time be? I don't know. Silksong is one of those games people were really clamoring for. We're talking years of twerking for a crumb of information regarding the sequel. 7 whole years of twerking, in fact. Now the game is officially released, the dust is settled, and people are loving the shit out of it. So much so that it has created this mass frenzy, which is expected if the subject is a game apparently as good as Silksong. But there's a problem, and it has nothing to do with the game itself, but it also does. Every year there's always that one game people treat as the crown jewel, the paragon of what a good game is supposed to be. What happens is there's a sort of exhausting discourse that is then exhumed from the grounds of the gaming community. It's a certain trend I've noticed. 3 or so years ago, Elden Ring came out, and the roaring applause it got from the community was, for a lack of a better term, thunderous. It was an incredible AAA game on all accounts, but the dialogue that started making the rounds because people were deep in this honeymoon phase with the game was eye-roll inducing.
Well, no microtransactions, an open-world single-player game with little to no navigational assists. Amazing!
Gaming is dead, and Elden Ring just revived it. It was probably one of the most cringeworthy moments in the community I've seen. It even got to the point where they were straight up pitting From Software against clearly successful AAA devs who also had numerous critically acclaimed titles under their belt at that point. And this same phenomenon is happening with Hollow Knight Silksong, but the difference is that it's an indie game developed by a very small number of people. The game being really good made hipsters act funny, such as demonizing the entire concept of expensive looking AAA games. I'm pretty sure Silksong being $20 had a lot to do with that. Wow, the game is $20 and it's good? What are these AAA devs doing? Sure, their dev teams are way bigger and the resources they put into the games they make are immense as hell, but I'm going to start fishing for this ideal world where games with expensive budgets need to be priced friendlier. And look, I get it. AAA titles in particular nowadays are pricey, but it's for a reason. There's something to be said about how bloated some budgets are becoming these days for these types of games. Industry pundits have come out stating that publishers are less willing to greenlight certain games due to ballooning development costs. But honestly, rising costs for these types of games was always inevitable. As new generations of gaming arrive, the expectations from consumers increase as they buy the new and shiny hardware, promising the doubling down on cutting edge visuals as well as bigger and better, more fleshed out immersive worlds for gamers to play in. This was bound to happen. Perhaps we're living in an era where big publishers are figuring out how to manage budgets more effectively, but that's besides the point. While there are outliers every so often that are produced under smaller and tighter dev budgets and teams that ostensibly outshine the average AAA games by far and wide clearly is what the market responds to the most, which is why publishers are willing to bet on them more. I 100% agree with the idea that you do not need eye-popping graphical fidelity with powerfully painstaking attention to detail to sell a game, but I'll be damned if any cockmuncher says to me that it's not needed, period, or that it isn't what gamers desire because of some successful indie title, which, I have to be real, get handled with Weenie Hut General gloves. Powered was a ridiculously fun game, but let's not act like there weren't glaring issues with it. Yes, I do know it was developed by an indie studio for like 99 cents. Your point? It doesn't make the game any better because a small team of individuals were working on it. The game manifested the same brain-dead rhetoric akin to the discourse around Silksong occurring throughout the community.
Did Powwow just destroy AAA gaming forever?
No, retard. Just because you're selective with specific game failures that fall under the category of high production values and then dishonestly compare those to some indie title that made the rounds and became a sprawling success doesn't mean that the AAA side of the industry is kaput. Bad games are bad games. Indies aren't going to magically make the concept of subpar games vanish. Some of these people talk about indie games as if they have this protective layer of anti-assness to them, and what happens is they become snobs against anything that looks high budget. Then they'll proceed to suckle on a ball sack of a game like Expedition 33, which hilariously enough is a turn-based game that starkly resembles the swagger of a AAA studio. But wait, it was developed by an indie team made up of ex-Ubisoft devs. Crazy part about this is it attracted a whole new audience of gamers into the turn-based genre who otherwise would have never touched stylized JRPG games like Metaphor ReFantasio or Persona. Sometimes I wonder what would happen or what the reaction would be if a top-of-the-line AAA team like Naughty Dog, with the obvious funding of Sony, made Expedition 33 themselves with better visuals and the same gameplay but with a $70 price point. Would those same people who champion creativity and or indies being the next frontier of new age gaming stand behind it as hard? I don't think so. You'll obviously see plaudits and praise, but let's not act like indie dick writers wouldn't have a different energy toward it because it's higher in budget and comes from a mainstream developer. The underdog fallacy tends to be strong with these people. And this brings me back to Silksong. It's a sequel a lot of people seem to like that seemingly improves upon the foundation of its predecessor. Pretty much looks the same, which is fine because that's typically what's supposed to happen with a sequel. But guarantee you that the cringe self-appointed prognosticators of the gaming scene would be in the comment section below of some anticipated high budget sequel and blabber,
Dude. Why sequel same?
while praising a game like Silksong for doing basically exactly that, and after waiting almost a literal decade for the new installment. But it was $20 and made by an indie studio, so yeah, you're supposed to think it's better than everything else. What are you, a retard? It didn't even have any official reviews before it launched. If it was a big budget game, you wouldn't even hear the end of it. The type of fanfare you see around Silksong is rarely ever extended to its indie contemporaries. As much as these sorts of cringe indie hipsters talk up these games and shit on anything AAA, you'll see that sales charts tell a completely different story. I don't see any indie games on this list. Where the hell are they? So odd how the sententious narratives about lower budgets and eating the big fish for brekkie is undercut by actual data that shows what gamers are truly receptive to. It's not so much the moralizing around games like Silksong that trigger me. It's still really annoying, but that's not what eats away at my dick the most. It's recognizing all these smaller games that look amazingly creative either going unnoticed by the vast amount of people who probably bought and played a game like Silksong, proceeding to evangelize around it and throwing shots at everything else in the industry and how sloppified everything is, when the majority of them don't actually show up for those other games. Now, I'm not going to be self-righteous and be on my soapbox and act like I'm a hardcore enthusiast of anything indie as if I buy a lot of them. I don't. But a lot of these Silksong just embarrassed AAA gaming types aren't cheerleading behind these smaller budget games as hard. In fact, they're not even touching them. Where's all the evangelical support for games like Sword of the Sea, The Plucky Squire, Shinobi Art of Vengeance, which came out weeks prior to Silksong to basically radio silence, Tales of Kanzera Zao, etc. I'm telling you today, you will not find these people around going as hard in the paint. You won't see it. All it takes is that one outlier indie game that bandwagoning freaks will use to pontificate to you about the state of the industry. Jeff Keighley would have his annual shows where he'd present to the audience a bunch of wacky, unique looking games made by developers with a dream, only to be met by a cascade of L's in the live chat. I know this sounds like Silksong slander, but it's not, I promise. I'm very happy for small indie teams like Team Cherry having their own major breakthroughs and defying all expectations. I know I love success stories, don't we all? It's just that these days, I hate fraud indie hipsters. They're annoying. Reddit tier humans.
Oh, sweet darling,